first became aware in January '95 when Reg Presley appeared on the daytime TV show with Judy Finnegan and Richard Madeley. I got a fairly long-term interest in UFO stuff, Roswell in particular, and it popped up on the old alt Paranet UFO news groups, as they were in that time before they got invaded by loonies. Most of the people that were in the business hung out on there one way or another, and I used to monitor it in my lunch hour. And this popped up more or less simultaneously with Reg Presley coming out that this guy had got this, what he thought was saying at the time was the Roswell alien being autopsied. Transpired it wasn't, but that's by the by. But that's when I first knew about it. Basically the same day that Reg Presley announced it. There was no particular information, as I recall, at the time of what the footage was. In the subsequent days and weeks, there was all sorts of wild rumours flying about of Truman could be seen walking through debris. The craft was being loaded onto a flatbed truck and hauled away. Really wild rumours left, right and centre flying about on the newsgroups. It wasn't until certainly a month or so later that it transpired that this was just the autopsy scene. First bit of material I got hold of was basically the tape that Ray was selling at the time. I couldn't even tell you when it was actually sold through. It was 96 maybe? 96. And I think this is one of the first UFO investigations that's been sort of collaborative and taking place on the internet. It was totally international. There were people in the States looking at photographs and things like that, and queries were popping up and being answered almost in real time about the content of the actual images when they appeared. Stuff like the curly cord, the phone, the clock, even the manner that the people doing the autopsy were actually doing it. People were popping up and saying, well, this doesn't look like a surgeon. No, you're quite right. You know, my father was a surgeon. He's turned around and said this isn't a surgeon. Well, a surgeon would do it, but somebody that knew what they were doing. And it was quite fascinating. At that time, up until I got actively involved in '98, when the two crossed, my own research into the Fort Worth photographs and the alien autopsy, I was just basically a spectator that popped in every now and again, because I've got some amateur knowledge about photography and 16mm photography, 8mm photography, and the chemistries and stuff like that. But I was just going on for the ride at the time. Like a lot of people, I thought, if this is everything it's cracked up to be, it's the smoking gun for Roswell, because that's how it was presented originally. This was the smoking gun for Roswell. It was only later when it came out that, you know, the alleged cameraman said that, well, no, it wasn't early July when I went out and photographed this thing. It was early June, and in fact the thing we reckoned didn't crash till May 31st. That people sort of went, oh, well, it makes sense. There's something awry here. In fact, it almost encouraged the people to say, well, if you were going to hoax Roswell, you would pick the right data. These things don't match. They've actually run with the wrong story if this is a made-up hoax. But they stuck to the guns, and that's the story they told. The Fort Worth photographs, as I've said for a long time, do show distinct symbols. And some of those distinct symbols do show up in certainly the debris footage that's included with the alien autopsy. I've been asked this all along, you know, does this prove the alien autopsy is a real and genuine piece of film? Doesn't really, because I've been primarily concerned with, my own research has been with the debris footage and not the alien autopsy footage, but the three bits of footage are presented together, you know, tent footage, autopsy 1, autopsy 2. They come as a package. Certainly the tent, the debris footage, I strongly believe there is something in there, and it should be researched further. It's a pity we can't get hold of an optical print off Ray Santilli, or Volker, who claims that, you know, he's now the owner of that footage and he's got it locked away in some dark security vault somewhere in Europe.
Well, basically, I knew Bruce Barlow from Transvision Videos. He was making quite a few UFO programs. I was in his studio one day and I said to him, would he like to license the alien autopsy footage? And then I said to him, well, I'll tell you what, you use the alien autopsy footage and I'll license the program from you. Which we agreed and put a deal together. I then contacted our distributor, who we arranged to get a release date. In the meantime, Bruce came to the studio and was surprised that we had the alien autopsy footage. He was absolutely shocked that we had this piece of footage and couldn't believe it. He then contacted GMTV, who wanted to do a program about it in the morning. I was in the office putting the sleeves into the videos because we was running out of time for the release date, and Ray Santilli came tearing into the office saying, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean what we're doing? He said, you know, you're going to muck up a deal that I've got running for my piece of footage. And I said, well, what else does it affect what I'm doing with my piece of footage? And that's when he said, look, you know, I need you not to put this on the television in the morning. You know, what does it take for you to pull it? And I said, well, what's it worth? And that's when Ray Santilli said, look, you know, we'll send you down some cash, and would you, you know, pull the GMTV, which we agreed. A motorbike arrived roughly about 11 o'clock in the morning. There was a brown paper bag, and inside there was a message in green crayon saying, I've never been blackmailed before. And basically that was it. I mean, we sort of said thank you very much and went to the pub. Yes.
I don't know who planned to fake the alien autopsy film, who was the brains behind it, if you like, who masterminded it and what their ideas were. I'm pretty sure it was more carefully planned than perhaps we might imagine. You have to remember, Ray Santilli started talking to me about it in 1993, so we're still 4 years away from the 50th anniversary of Roswell. But I guess it's something to do with that it was purely, oh boy, you know, the Roswell anniversary is coming up, and I think it was, even though it came out before then, I think that would certainly have been in the planning. If we are to believe Keith Bateman, and I've no reason to disbelieve Keith's testimony, the idea came from him. And again, it wasn't a sit down and plan it, it was an off-the-cuff remark. Someone in Keith's office had a book on Roswell, and they were, you know, knocking around a few ideas, and somebody said, Ray Santilli, I believe, wouldn't it be great if we had film footage of Roswell? So I think it may have started with an off-the-cuff, simple, daft comment like that. And then somebody's thought, someone a little bit more savvy, a little bit more shrewder, someone a little bit more know-how has thought, yes, I think we might have a look at that. And hey presto, 2 years later we have the alien autopsy film. Now, whilst Santilli and his partners involved in this will be tortured, will be called everything under the sun, and rightfully so, we also have to take the positives out of this film. because in 1995, I think the UFO subject was at its height, higher profile than ever before. Certainly the X-Files helped, but so did the Alien Autopsy film, and it put Roswell firmly on the map. And if you were involved in UFO research at the time, everything was booming. Magazines were selling, conferences were sold out, newspaper articles were being written, and a lot of it was serious as well. You know, you had figureheads coming out of the woodwork. Nick Pope was making a name for himself, a man from the ministry. Yeah, and so it also gave an air of authenticity to the whole subject as a byproduct. Also, if we look at the Roswell case in general, the authorities in America had always denied that any bodies were ever recovered at Roswell. They said, no, it was a weather balloon. No, it was Project Mogul weather balloon. After the Santilli film came out, it was then and only then that the Air Force said, well, yes, there was bodies at Roswell after all. They said there were crash test dummies for parachute testing, but nonetheless, they said there were bodies there. And I bet a pound to a penny that it was the Alien Autopsy film that forced them into that admission.
The 4 photographs that Bond took, the first photographs, substantiate his claim that he was the only photographer there, because there wasn't a story at the time. Those 4 photographs include the famous Ramey message, which we can partly read, and which implicate that something quite heavy was going on somewhere, because we can clearly see the word victims in one of the first lines of the message. The later ones, we were still unsure of who took the 2 Marcel shots, but they were taken at another time, presumably later. The content of the photographs has been moved around. In the Marcel, some items have been moved. Certainly in the Newton shot, which looks like it was taken around about the same time as the Marcel shots, because the backgrounds are the same, packaging in the background is the same, though what we think is Marcel's tie is missing off the radiator at the back of the room. So this demarcates the taking of the series of those photographs into 3 sections, 2, 2.5, 3 sections. The early sections just show Ramey and Dubose, understandable. Together with what we think is the earliest look at the debris. Bond always remarked that the debris, the one impression, the lasting impression that he did have was that when he walked into Ramey's office, it smelled like a fire. He'd been to several, as a sort of duty photographer for the ST, he'd been to several fires and he knew the smell, and that was the sort of smell he got. That's when he saw, as he called it, the junk on the floor. The later set, the Marcel set, we can substantially prove were taken by at least two different lenses. Each shot give different results of the analysis. And it's always interesting that Bond, over the years that I knew him, has never wavered in the fact that he doesn't recall seeing Marcel, has no conscious memory of Marcel being present. He's always assumed he was there because he saw him in the photographs. But he has no conscious memory of it. He's conscious memory of Ramey, conscious memory of Dubose, because when he arrived at the office, Dubose was there to meet him. Ramey was elsewhere. But no conscious memory of Marcel at all. And this basically substantiates that fact, that the Marcel pictures were taken at a later time. I don't want to go into the exact details of what happened, but even Bond didn't know this until he got in touch with an old pal, a surviving reporter at the Star Telegram, lives in New York now. And on the phone call he said, of course you do know why you got in to see the debris, don't you? I And Bon said no. And the story was told him. I won't go into details. I promised Bon not to until things cleared up, basically. But it's General Ramey, prior to the Roswell event, owed the Star Telegram a very big favour. He was a career military guy. Events took place in the prior 12 months that would have stopped him getting further up the greasy pole in military. Subsequently, of course, he went on to Washington and he was in charge of, I think he was in charge of the Air Force coverage around Washington when the flyover took place in '51. He certainly was there on the panel with the generals. So, yeah. In fact, everybody got very well out of Roswell. Everybody did very well. But that, yeah, the General Ramey was very beholden to the Star Telegram, and it would make perfect sense. If something big was happening, they would get first pick. Is it live or is it Memorex, as I put it in my lecture? I've looked at this. A lot of people tend to go into minutiae of what Ray Santilli has said and try to analyse his stories ad infinitum, especially on the internet. You don't get anywhere. You just chase your tail. There's so many stories, so many facts. So I've gone out and looked at things Ray Santilli couldn't easily have controlled. Two things he gave away fairly early. One was the cameraman's story of how he was called out to New Mexico. He gave a description of his journey out to the crash site. Wasn't Roswell, and I still can't understand why Ray Santilli keeps banging on about it being the Roswell alien. It isn't the Roswell alien at all. It's a completely different event. Can we verify that fact? A few years ago, being involved with the AA stuff on the internet, I got into contact with a nice guy in California called Ed German. He was interested in the Fort Worth photographs, and got on very well. Still get on very well. As luck would have it, he's a native from New Mexico. He was brought up in Albuquerque. While he was going through college, he was a medical technician in the hospital in Albuquerque, so he knows something about medical procedures, especially surgical procedures, because he was a surgical orderly. So he had comments to make on the way the surgery was handled in the alien autopsy. He's also got family down there. His brother still lives in Albuquerque, so he's got somewhere to park himself when he goes on holiday. So he decided to try and follow the cameraman's description of the journey, taking into account changes over the years. I'm talking 50, 60 years. I tried to help him as best I could by tapping on the US Geological Survey aerial photographs, so he's got a set of those to work with. But his background knowledge of the area, because him and his brother used to go out rock hunting as well, so they know the desert. Several other people have tried to find the site, and Michael Heisman's claimed to have found it, Steve Kaiser's claimed to have found it, and they're all fairly close, within a roughly 1 to 3 mile area. They've all ended up at the same point. Anyway, Ed decided to take his brother's 4x4 and go out and try and trace the journey. The main highway between Socorro and Magdalena has changed over the years, and one point has been rerouted quite markedly. But taking into account, you can follow the description that the cameraman gives. You turn off the highway, go through what looks like a gateway, turns out to be Box Canyon. You follow closely treacherous route down through the mountains today's track takes you out onto the plain, so you don't actually go by the mountains at all. But if you look at the old maps, and especially the aerial photographs, you can see there are several feeder roads, disused roads, that feed several mines down the mountains, and this would have been the road used back in 1947. You follow that road down, Cameron said you crossed a wooden bridge. There's no trace of any bridge now, but the road does go down an arroyo, across an arroyo, a small canyon, and it has changed markedly. There's been several big washouts there, and even the cameraman said, allegedly, when he visited 10-12 years ago, that bridge was no longer there. You do come out roughly where the other people have placed the crash site, but Ed proceeded on up the canyon, because there was one feature that the cameraman mentioned in his story, that the rock and the desert itself had been melted by extreme heat, and there was a bluey-green substance on the rocks. Ed continued up the canyon, which turns out to be Nogle Canyon, about 10-15 miles outside Socorro, and there is a point you reach a dry lake bed, which is also mentioned by the cameraman, where you start to find these deposits splattered on the walls of the canyon, on rocks. There are also several very strange heat inflicted groves of bushes, cottonwood trees, that have been burnt from above, not below, as you would expect in a bushfire. These have been charred from above, and the walnut tree is the same. There's several walnut trees there. Estimated the trees have only been there in the last 100 years, and this burn damage is quite old. The actual deposit itself is called crystallobite. It's a mineral, volcanic mineral, and it appears that this deposit in this canyon is unique in that you normally only get crystallobite appearing in volcanic areas where there's active volcanism. It only gets produced in excess of 1300 degrees centigrade, and then it's only deposited in flakes in very small quantities. There are only 2 or 3 sites in the States where this stuff is actually found. This crash site has got what must be several tons of this spread about in an area maybe the size of 2 or 3 football fields. Now we come on to my research, which crossed the AA story in 1999. I was in the throes of analysing Bon Johnson's photographs of the Fort Worth debris, the debris on the floor in General Ramey's office. And though everybody was telling me I was totally off my head, I was coming up with what I thought were symbols seen on the debris, on what was thought to be the balloon envelope. And by that time, I'd got quite a little collection of known symbols that did keep cropping up. What looks like a number 2 crops up in several places in the photographs. And I thought, well, there have been other instances where these symbols have allegedly been seen on UFOs, on things that people have been given in encounters. I wonder if there's anything published. Went out on the internet, had a look, didn't find anything in it initially at all that cross-matched with any of the symbols. And just by chance, I got Philip Mantle's book, Philip Mantle and Mike Heisman's book on the desk, at the page where they have the full frame plate of the frame from the debris footage, with the guy holding the 2 panels. And I thought, well, I wonder if there's anything in this. So I basically got a glass out and had a look at the photograph, just to see if there was anything visible, because I knew the debris itself had symbols which didn't match originally anything I'd found in the Fort Worth photographs. And purely by accident, I happened to glance over the table at the back of the guy, and there, in the gloom in the back of the photograph, a symbol just leapt out, and this was almost identical to the one I'd seen 10 minutes before on the computer in the Fort Worth photographs. It's a back-to-back J with an elongated arm. Very distinctive. Oh my God. How on earth would Ray Santilli know to put that in the debris if the guy had hoaxed the thing? I had a very busy weekend looking at the rest of the photograph, and after 2 weeks I was able to match all the symbols I could see on that beam, which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if I remember rightly, 4 or 5, with the same symbols I was finding in the Fort Worth photograph debris.
I can't ever remember him telling me that he had original footage. I think if he had it done, we would have laughed. He made it because he asked me to make it, and he found somebody else to make it cheaper. So he must have made it. You know, I was a little bit, I suppose, jealous of the fact that he'd got it licensed and distributed all around the world. I mean, anybody would be. We're all in the same business. In my opinion, yes, it's a fake. Yeah. Why ask me to make a piece of footage and then all of a sudden another piece of footage turns up by another production company? It's got to be a fake.
The Alien Autopsy film, whatever your opinions are of it, was a media man's dream. You know, from television to newspapers to magazine, it was great. And so was Santilli. He'd tell them, you know, he'd tell them anything. And up until this film came out, most people had heard of Roswell in one frame or another. But with no disrespect, it was a number of elderly gentlemen recounting stories from long ago. Hey presto, wasn't stories anymore. You had an alien on the slab being cut up before your very eyes. It was a media's dream, and you can't blame the media for taking on the story. But I don't think that since then that the media have taken a negative attitude. If you look back, and I've been involved a long time, and I know my colleagues here have also been involved a long time, if you look at the way the media treats the subject, it does come in peaks and troughs. There are times it will become a silly season subject, you know, Parliament's closed, the football season's over with, let's have something daft to write about, and they'll pick the balmiest UFO researcher they can find and they'll do a feature on them. But there are other times when it is taken seriously, and that is, so it swings and roundabouts, and I don't think this film had an overall negative effect as far as the media is concerned. I don't think they got, as far as they were concerned, they got their fingers burned. It was just a story of the day and then move on to the next one. I would never ever say Santilli's had his day. I've known him a long time. He's a very, very likeable chap. You cannot dislike him. You know, I do not like what he's done, but I cannot say I dislike the fella. He's the kind of guy, you know, he always meets you with a smile and a handshake and that kind of thing, which is genuine as well. And but knowing Ray as I do, I would never say he's had his day. It would never surprise me if there wasn't something else around the corner. He's gone very quiet recently since the Alien Autopsy movie was released, and we've been hot on his trail. But no, I would never say he'd had his day. He wants to keep this mystery going for as long as he can. It suits his purpose. So we have to remember there is another complete autopsy film that's never been seen anywhere. I've seen it in Ray's office. It's not been seen on television or on video. So there's always something up his sleeve, and I'm sure if he had the right offer he'd release it. So don't ever rule him out. When I look back on the 13 years so far of research into this film, I don't think I would honestly have changed anything or done anything different. But there is one thing that really does annoy me, apart from the hoax, the fake, is the fact that in 1995, when the interest in the film was at its height, when it was being shown around the world, when it was appearing on newspapers and magazines, there were those individuals, mainly in the United Kingdom, that accused me of being involved in the hoax. They accused me openly and in private of being on Santilli's payroll and taking part in faking the whole damn film. And that has really stuck in my throat. It was one of the things that actually spurred me on to try and get to the bottom of it. Their reasoning for this, that was in 1995, my wife and I were having an extension built on our house, and they thought, where did Philip Mantle get all his money from? Well, Philip Mantle didn't get any money from. It was from my wife. She had a property of her own that she'd sold, and that's where we got the money. But nobody thought to ask me. They put 2 and 2 together and made 26. And that is the one thing that spurred me on and annoyed the hell out of me all these years. I've used it as a catalyst to keep going. And I look forward to the day when I meet these individuals again, and I will wait their apologies. We talk about Ray Santilli in general. He's a very, very likeable chap. I don't think it would be unkind to say he's a bit of an Arthur Daly type character. He's a wheeler and dealer. I think he'd admit that himself. Nice guy. But he's got a colourful past. I mean, for those that don't know, remember the infamous Birdie song? Well, Ray was one of the dancers in the Birdie song, in the bird suit in his early days. You know, that is Ray Santilli. If it will make him money, he will do it.
I'm Keith's partner now, so business partner, I should add. Make sure we put that bit in.
He said, look, you know, we'll send you down some cash, and would you, you know, pull the GMTV, which we agreed. Yeah, yeah. No.
What did he say, £25, did he say?
Yeah. I wouldn't mind doing one for 35,000 for Bruce Barlow.